Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And you guys know my custom here is to welcome our guests, but I welcome them this way. I want to honor them because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive, their time. Time, 24 hours given to every man and every woman on this planet. How we manage time, how we respect her will tell me much about you, because based on your understanding of her, you will value her more precious than anything else. So I want to challenge you guys to learn how to honor and respect time. And so I want to thank Katie for coming with this time, man. That's precious. She's coming to spend some of this quality stuff with us. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created her. And so we want to honor her that she's coming to share both of these precious commodities with us. And the purpose of her coming is so that you and I can become better human spirits while we have the opportunity to engage with her wisdom, her knowledge, and her insight. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thanks so much for having me here.
It is an honor. As I mentioned to you that I usually toss this question on the onset of the podcast to everyone that comes, because I mentioned to you that the prize that we get to enjoy while we're here on this planet is that of a servant. And my question to you is, how do you serve mankind?
Yeah, for me, I'd say we'll probably get into this deeper in the show, but one of my areas that I've gone through personally and I work with professionally is spiritual awakening and that connection to personal intuition. So for me, it's really, I think that connection with that larger source and being a channel for that is the way. Like what comes through there feels like a calling, a passion. And I've kind of learned to trust that even if I don't see what it is or how it helps people, that there's a purpose in it being out in the larger world as well. And so that might be, some of it's how you show up for your friends and family, your kids. It's been my practice. It's what's guided me to do my practice in the way I do it, to write the book, to start speaking now. Like, I don't always know where it's leading, but I do trust it now.
Yeah, I love that. I always tell people, because I grew up in the church, and the church language calls that faith, meaning that we don't know many things, or sometimes nothing, but it tells us that every man and every woman is given the measure of faith. And when we read it in context, it talks about the measure of faith for their service, what their gift is. And when they operate in that gift, there's a sureness in a way that they don't know everything, but there's a confidence that they trust it and they just perform and they just do that. And that's exactly what you talk about. Because this confidence, you don't know all things.
And I get a lot from clients in spiritual awakening too there's a lot around like just trust the journey, or like messages around just trust. And I think that relationship, I mean, for me, I trusted a lot more, but that was trust that was developed over time and a feedback loop of it's helpful to trust this and it's not helpful to not trust it too. So some people just trust, and sometimes it's a journey, and I think that's okay too.
I think it has to be, because no one is 100% sure. We have that phase that they call the imposter syndrome phase that we go through, like, wait a minute, am I sure? Am I this and that? And all of that. And we learn, one of the stages I tell people within the personal development process is just that. We become more confident as we walk. We become just like a young baby becomes more confident as he or she continues to walk more and more. Eventually, as they continue to get up, even though they fall physically, after a while, they're running and doing tremendous amount of things. Same thing. There's nothing different at all. And we are just flying. One of the principles that we do here, our customs, if you will, is go back. I believe all of us are traumatized. Mom, dad, dog, cat, everybody, the birds, everybody's all traumatized. And it manifests in our behaviors and so forth and our beliefs. It manages how we deal with relationships with people and so forth. So one of the spaces that we do, the first space I believe that we reside once we land on this planet is that with the family. And the family is an important catalyst, if you will, because there, again, it forms a lot of things that in ways that we process our minds and our modus operandus is how we believe in things and so forth. What was your family unit like?
Yeah, I think family wise, I'd say kind of like no average. I think we all have. I'm also a trauma therapist as well, so I specialize in that as well. And I think there's a piece of spiritual being in a human body and nervous system, and a
Yeah.
lot of the work I do too is understanding, even with the spiritual knowing or awakening piece and that connection, it doesn't get rid of the human nervous system. So like trauma is part of the deal, but
Mhm.
sometimes the term can get thrown around a little too much in different areas, where there's a difference between like PTSD level trauma or severe trauma versus this is more nervous system stuff that people have built up. So I think a lot of my family system, I wasn't raised religious or spiritual in that way. So I was very skeptical, more science based. I'd say more average, but it's more as I did more deeper healing work for myself, I realized there is more kind of time period and cultural stuff that impacts the family in terms of that like capitalistic, everybody's working, really busy, disconnected, like not a lot of time, not a lot of extended family or network, like functional addiction stuff. Things where you're like, hey, it's not the childhoods where some people you look there, it's clearly a traumatic childhood. It's more one of those ones where people are like, no, everything was fine. But then when you dig deeper, you're like, oh, there are ways this has impacted me.
Yeah.
And also, I think another thing that kind of comes up for me in talking about that is it's so common that it's always like our parents did the best they can with what they had usually, and they're a product of their own time period and generation too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
That's
the more you go further out of like all the different levels of society, time period, larger systems that impact.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, as I mentioned before, society meaning each generation has societal changes and acceptance and taboos and different things like that that each has to deal with as we move forward in life in the progress of mankind, if you will. And when we say trauma, sometimes people think of all the bad stuff. For trauma, I tell people can be very benign situation. I usually give an example of a child, a young individual. Mom and dad is busy, whatever, and this young individual is very excited about something, and they approach mom and dad because they're so excited, and mom and dad is actually really busy, and mom and dad said not now or whatever, or didn't pay attention, and that young individual, interpret that as rejection. And that becomes a traumatizing situation to that individual, even though it was something very simple and mom and dad was actually really truly busy at something. But the interpretation of mom and dad's action has placed an imprint on this young individual that will now govern them for the rest of their life. And it was something as simple as that. And so there's trauma is based, depending, I tell people, on how that young individual, interpret that incident and how it affects them on an individual basis and how it manifests in their life. It's nothing, there is trauma, as you talk about, the real stuff that is intense. But then there are also the ones that are very benign, that to that individual, it intense and it
Yeah.
causes them to react in certain ways. But yeah, it depends on the individual. But here you are. And this family is just normal, as they say. I like that word normal because I tell people I still don't know what it means. But it's a simple family, chasing the program, as you say, just making money and making sure everything is well. As you were in that particular program, that family, what was your relationship like? What was your beginnings of your relationship towards others outside of the family? How were you relating to others, your friends and other family members and so forth?
Yeah, I think trying to think how to answer it because it's probably different at different time periods, but I know I didn't figure out that I'm intuitive and empathic until about mid-20s or so. I already had my master's in psychology. I was already well into the field. And
Hmm.
so I know once I kind of figured out that I actually can feel and sense energy, a lot more things kind of clicked into place where I was like, this has been happening my whole life, actually. But again, most kind of Western culture doesn't really recognize like the spiritual or the intuitive. And I think my experience was similar where it's not about adults kind of intentionally trying to gaslight children or something, but sometimes it's like, no, everything's fine. But if you're sensing the energy's off, like, but it doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. So a lot of us, I think, don't like lose that connection with ourselves or don't trust it or just aren't even taught it's real because most of our systems are very logical based. We're in the habit of asking even kindergarten kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we like are supposed to plan these things and make it
Yeah.
happen. I always found that I think part of the empathic part of me and highly sensitive, I have a lot of people drawn to me and like share a lot of things really quickly. So that drew me to psychology pretty early on. Um, and it was something I had to kind of learn to manage and have different boundaries around in terms of like when to do this, when not to have more reciprocal relationships in my personal life.
Yeah. Did you start learning about boundaries at an early age? Because that is, most of us don't learn anything about boundaries until way into our adult life after we start that spiritual journey, because there's a degree of wanting to please everyone and wanting to relate to everyone and wanting to connect to everyone, that we don't get an opportunity to really learn about our boundaries until later on as we walk through our spiritual awakening, if you will. Because I know with me, I'm still learning that, how to
Yeah.
I'm still, what, 60, 63 now. I'm still learning that. So yeah, it's a part of life. How did you
Yeah, I
handle
learned
it?
a lot later.
Okay.
And then, but I also think young children do have it pretty naturally. If you see really young children, they usually don't have the filter. They usually know what they want, and what they don't want. I think it's a lot of the adult conditioning that it's like, oh,
Yeah,
that's rude, or there it becomes. But if you see really young ones, like, do you want to do this? Or do you like this? They're like, no, like they know.
that's true. There's some truth there. So here you are as this young girl. I believe the thread, and that's one of the things I love about the name Threads of Enlightenment, is that that thread is with us as a young individual, and it's all through our life, and it will walk with us and be a part of our being, if you will. And so you have this ability to connect, the empathy, the part to feel, to be able to connect with others, and it drew you and pulled you to psychology as a young individual, one in high school and stuff like that. Did you begin to pursue the knowledge of psychology and so forth, or were you still not really pursuing it, or just being a quote unquote a teenager, if you will?
Both. I was definitely like a teenager and not didn't have my stuff together, and I was like I did a college level course in high school and was interested too. So it was both. And but until I kind of went through my spiritual awakening later in my 20s, that was I had the intuitive ability. I didn't realize it was there though, and I always thought any fluctuations for myself, like ups and downs, anxiety, depression, stuff, like I always thought it was just me and my own emotions, or there's something wrong with me, versus I'm picking up on other people or the collective shifts.
Hmm.
And in figuring out, I realized my dominant ability is more empathic. So I can feel other people's emotions or physical sensations in my own body, and that'll shift like depending on what's going on collectively or who I'm around. But I didn't realize that was happening until adulthood. And for people who have that dominant ability, I really agree that it's like, it feels more like a curse than a blessing at first. It takes a while to learn how to work with it, to have more of the energetic boundaries, to do some deeper healing work so you're not taking it all on as much anymore. So I feel like in the beginning, it was definitely more of a burden and harder on me than it is now. Because I didn't
Yeah,
have
in the
any
beginning.
mentorship or how to work with this or even validate, like even know it was happening.
Yeah, in the beginning for me, it was it was intense. I remember being in crowds of people, and the data coming to me from all the people's lives and stuff like that. At the same time, uh, was intense. There were a few people that I would stop and speak to when I knew they were in deep crisis. One man was he was on his way to commit suicide, and actually, I was in my business suit, and we were about to have a meeting, and I felt the need to go to a pull to go to the restroom, and I'm going to the bathroom, and this guy was coming out, and it was for him, and
Mm-hmm.
when I got there, I knew exactly what he was thinking and what he
Yeah.
wanted to do and how he was going to do it, and pulled him aside and I began to talk with him and engage with him. Yeah, in the beginning it's difficult, and so it got to a point where I felt I was losing myself in the midst of all of the data
Yeah.
coming at you. So here, when you what solidified in you to cause you to say, this is where I'm going to go to for college? What was it that said that manifested in your life that says, okay, I'm going this route regardless?
Yeah, I don't in at that time I don't think I really know. I think there was a thread kind of leading it, but I think I was interested in it. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a full understanding of how long the process actually takes, which probably worked in my favor because I think if I would have had it all laid out, it might have been too overwhelming. I also
Yeah.
had parents who were kind of like, you either move out, like start paying rent, or you go to school. And I moved out pretty quickly at 18 or so and
Yeah.
was on my own. But so I kind of knew like that education piece was always encouraged, and I didn't just knew I was interested in it. So I kind of just went in 1 year at a time. In
Yeah.
hindsight, I feel like it was the path I was meant to take, but I didn't fully know at the time. And I think then, yeah, it was something I was interested in. I could see myself really enjoying the field. I really relate to what you talked about the overwhelming piece too, because again, like I think there's a lot of psychology boundary work around like saying no, knowing your capacity, like the conscious mind stuff. But for people who are like empathic or pick it up intuitively, there's a whole level of energetic boundary work
Yeah.
too, because I
Yeah.
found that was very similar for me too, of like just way too much all the time, doing work more to say with like, okay, if I'm really meant to help this person or if I'm drawn to, I'm open to it coming in, but I don't like, I think people with that nervous system are almost like an energetic sponge in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And when no
Mm-hmm.
one teaches us, we almost just take it all on and want to help
All
everybody. And
in.
it can be like at our
Yeah.
own detriment. Yeah.
Because we initially, I thought, here I'm feeling all this stuff. I'm supposed to help everyone,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
didn't understand that I couldn't help everyone, and I wanted to help everyone, and I was trying, and even while I was trying and to do that, the burden of not being able to help, was beginning to weigh on me and all this kind of stuff. And so there's a way you can get lost in it, because I had to learn how to back away and then come back in to find the balance where I was able to manage myself within
Yeah. Yeah.
that space as well. And because you can get lost, and you can get lost quickly.
For sure. And it's a process because you talk
Yeah.
about those layers of conditioning and family, like being good, being polite, not hurting everyone. Like
Yeah.
our childhood and conditioning stuff can really like color that too. So it can
Mm-hmm.
feel like emotionally we have to, or we feel really guilty and take it all on. And some of that is actually more like childhood conditioning
Yeah.
stuff that
Yes.
draws us. And then there can be stuff where it is like intuitively called, where it's like, this feels like I'm a channel for this to come through and I really want to help without any attachment to what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. I remember my youngin days when that began to happen to me, and I remember when I came to a space where it was way too much. I remember kneeling down and saying, I can't. I need a break. I need a break. Can you hold it back a little so that I can function? And it was held back a little so that I can function. Um, Another part of mine was dreams as well. I wouldn't remember, but the dreams that I did remember were absolutely spot on. And so things like that and all these different things. So here you are, this girl collecting data now in school, how did all of that information as you're studying begin to affect you?
Yeah, I found for me kind of there's a lot of value in psychology. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think there was, but I found when I've finished my first couple degrees, like I found that there was a sense kind of within me of like, this can't be all there is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of focus on conscious mind. I mean, there's other tools when you're out, when you can specialize after you've graduated, that you can do more with the body, intuition, subconscious, unconscious, but that wasn't any part of my training early on.
Yeah.
And so I found that I could really analyze like all the layers of conditioning and all the reasons, like all the things that weren't working well, like relationship patterns, things that I'm like, oh, this isn't going great. But I didn't find it transformed things in terms of, it's like I could analyze it, but I was still stuck in a lot of the same ruts. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and also the kind of helper, the intuitive part, at that point, I didn't realize, like, I didn't know that was playing a role at all. I didn't know about highly sensitive. I didn't know about empathic. That wasn't part of the discussion. And I basically burnt out pretty hard in the field. Like I'm a hard worker. I'm kind of like a latchkey kid from the early 90s, 80s. So it was like independent early on, kind of that old soul mature
Yeah.
of like, okay, she's fine. With being highly sensitive too, I was one of those kids who like, you wouldn't tell anything's wrong because I wouldn't want to kind of burden anybody else or have them worry, that I would just like handle it myself. Whereas some kids who externalize more, or they'll like tell you, or they'll act out, like they get adult attention. Whereas some of the ones who are more like, they'll just turn it inwards, everybody's like, oh, you're fine. And it's like, well, not really, but you seem fine. And so I think kind of, it wasn't really more, when I really reached a burnout place, I also really enjoyed traveling. So I would travel at different points in between, but I got a one-way ticket to India and I ended up staying in India, Nepal for about 9 months. And that's where my spiritual awakening started happening. I didn't like, I was just looking to travel and get away and recharge, but I was doing a lot of volunteering at a meditation center, started exploring more like energy work, breath work, a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation. And now I know in hindsight, like all those practices can really increase spiritual abilities, but I didn't even know that was possible. Like that wasn't on my radar at the time.
Yeah. Those are the main tools
Mm-hmm.
to the gateway to meditation is one of the most powerful tool available to mankind to usher in one to the spiritual realm. I tell people the breath is the bridge by which we can walk from the natural to the supernatural. Athletes are familiar with the breathing. They will take the breathing and the breath, and then you'll see them walk into that realm of where they are in a state of meditation and so forth. Why did you pick India? Who did you come around? What did you read? What was it that pulled you towards India?
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I do think it was kind of a thread going. It was one. Now I'm more conscious of it. Usually when I travel now, it's more of an intuitive pull or a feeling. I wasn't conscious of that at the time. I'd more just kind of pick something. I had read a book or something and saw an application thing at the back. And I think after work at like 3 a.m, I had sent it in, not thought of it again, and then got accepted.
Yeah.
So
I
it was
love
pretty
how those things
spontaneous,
happen.
but yeah.
Yeah. It's always something very mundane, and yet it is the most powerful thing that will happen in our life. And I always try to make people aware of the decisions that we make.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that life is a series of the decisions that we make and the consequences of those decisions, good or bad, whatever they are. And that's what life is, just decisions and the consequences of our decisions. And so I always try to tell people to be aware as much as you can of those decisions that you're making, because there's a timestamp on some of them. Instantaneously, you have 5 minutes, 5, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. There's a timestamp. So be very mindful of your decisions and make them wisely. But they're powerful tools that can lead your path. And here you are in India. India can bring you some wonderful insight really quickly. While you were there and you were exposed to a different culture. How did that begin to affect you as you talked about your awakening? How did that begin to happen to you? And that awakening, what did it look like as you began to experience that?
Yeah, I just became a lot more aware. The meditation piece and just having schedule cleared where you're not in the rational thinking mind of like planning, work, school, future focused all the time. Like that deep dive into having all that space and that deep dive into having that time to practice where I just came in a lot more of the subtleties of like the internal shift. So
Mm-hmm.
at first it became more of like being aware of that sensitivity to energy of like, hey, like I'm feeling different depending on the place I'm at or things
Yeah.
that are happening where I wasn't conscious of that before. And for me, my awakening was a lot more gradual. So it kind of started in India, but then it continued to unfold over the next. Like I continued to explore it separately when I came back to Canada. I kept those parts of my world very separate of like work and like spiritual closet, personally
Yeah.
exploring that, which I do think you need to get pretty grounded in that. And as a health professional, you need to have evidence-based ways to actually bring it into the
Yeah.
work at all. But then it started to evolve more and more where because before it was just more like raw feeling, like emotions, sensations. It was an intuitive development program that I took that I really realized like, oh, I'm actually, my internal feelings and emotions are dramatically shifting depending on who I'm working with and not having any rational information. Like that was a real light bulb moment for me to realize like, how long has this been happening? Like I don't have any rational evidence. I don't know this person at all. So to be able to describe in this much detail what's going on for them and even have like pain in my body or different things shifting that was like an injury they had and then have that go away with the next person or the next exercise. It took like quite a while for me to learn like, okay, what do I do with this? Or how do I know that it's even mine or not mine? How do I have the boundaries to not necessarily take it on in that way anymore? And then also now I know when you know your intuitive, like your dominant gateway, the more you pay attention to that, the other senses can start opening up. So then it started to evolve more into like, okay, here's visual pictures of like down to details of stuff that's happening, like someone's home, clothes, like someone they met earlier,
Mm-hmm.
auditory stuff of like, here's the name, here's exactly what's going on, here's stuff from childhood, ancestral. And so now I really have one foot in both worlds where I've learned I have a lot more boundaries around it. So it's not as overwhelming because it was getting to a point where similar for you. I was like, I don't want this waking me up at 4 a.m. like random stuff. Like I don't want to feel it all in this way when it's not mine to fix. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I look at it as data. It's scientific data, but it's not the data that we are programmed to see in school.
Yeah.
Emotional data is just as powerful as any written
Mm-hmm.
data
Mm-hmm.
because you can identify at a deeper level than that written data with that person emotionally, feeling their pain, identifying with them at a deeper, much deeper level than that written data, even though it's there, but that is data. It's just a different type
It
of
is.
data.
And I
So I
think on
always
the
tell
empathic
people,
side of it, there's a couple metaphors I'll use because I was in it too. Like I did all the same things because I was raised in the same culture. I didn't have the same training.
yeah.
And I had to find that out over time and different approaches. But with the empathic ability, when someone's like, it's emotional data, but it's almost like they're emotionally drowning, we can jump in and be trying to save them while they're drowning and we get pulled under too. It's almost more our own kind of healing and our own energetic boundaries can be like, I can see them drowning and I can offer them a life raft or a pole, but they need to grab onto it. And I don't need to actually drive because other people need our empathy and action. They don't actually need our empathic intuitive ability. Like they don't need us to feel the emotion at the same level.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you began to synchronize both, being exposed in India and you came back, as you're synchronizing both now, because I know as you're doing that, there is a shift because the other field, the written data field, those guys are going to look at you at some point and go, what are you doing? That voodoo stuff, as they say, because again, it's a different set of data and they're not aware, they weren't trained that way. And there's an uncomfortableness as you're staying closer and closer there and you're being exposed to this particular thing. As you are in that and you're synchronizing, what changes began to happen to you as you're trying to marry them both in your life as you are moving through and you again, you have your clients are coming, and you can you're in this traditional space, and you know that you can take your client to a deeper space, but you have the um, restraints, if you will,
Yeah.
from the other side. How did you manage that?
Yeah, it was definitely a long process. It was a number of years. This isn't this is what I did in a quick, easy step process. There was a number of years where I kept it separate. And I also think when you're building that trust and that confidence, like learning to walk in the intuitive space, I wouldn't recommend that you're working with other people
Yeah.
in a vulnerable position. That should really be separate, because you need to get stronger in that yourself. There was a number of years too where I wrestled with that question too, because I was having all these experiences, like almost seeing other lifetime stuff with people, getting intuitive messages, getting stuff from ancestors, getting stuff from like early childhood, where I was and seeing things shift for people that I wasn't taught was possible in like traditional Western psychology. And this was all more like exploring this separately in like energy work dynamics, personal life. Like this wasn't direct work with like psychology clients. So
Yeah.
I kept that separate for a long time. And I really wrestled with that question of, do I just keep this separate, like continue in the field, like do it the traditional way? Or at that point, I wasn't sure if there was even a way to bring them together. So I didn't know if I'd have to just walk away from psychology completely. I had a pretty profound moment, like one of those awakening kind of moments, where I was wrestling with that question for a number of months. And I was washing dishes at my sink with like an apartment that didn't have a dishwasher. I put down the soap, and this bubble popped up, and it was about like that big. It just floated up, and it just hung out at eye level, and then it just started going down the hallway, and it ended up making 3 different turns, stayed eye level the entire time. I've never seen a physical bubble behave that way in my life since then.
Yeah.
I followed it, not even believing it was actually happening almost, but it went into the room I had set up as like an energy meditation room. It hovered there, and then it popped, and I got full body goosebumps. And like right in that moment, I had a full knowing of like, this is it has to be based on this.
Yeah.
It still didn't answer how, like, and intuition never will. Like our logical mind always wants, like, give me the full GPS directions of like, I'm going to turn left here, and then here, and then here, and exactly how is this going to work? And it'll just give us like, nope, go this way. And maybe a sense of what comes later, but there's like nothing in between filled out at all. Like that's the journey.
Isn't that wonderful? That's that piece that I talked about is called faith, where you step out. And even though the pages are blank, but we know that that's the direction that we need to move forward, and we step out. And I tell people that space right there, a lot of people fail. A lot of people want the data, want the information, and if they don't have it, they don't move, and they're
when it's
there
scary,
for
it's
years.
risky. It often goes against what we're taught is the safe path, or like
Exactly.
if you follow this, like it's more safe, it's more guaranteed, it's more accepted. This is unknown.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's that piece right there. And the job is another thing I tell people. That job, that security that they program us to believe that job gives us security, it does not. Because that job could disappear tomorrow. And where is that security? So the security is in you. You are that one that will make that security. All of us, I always tell people, wealth and success was deposited in you when you were born. And you have the ability to become and be success, because you are success. You are wealthy. It's in you. It's just have to find the venue or the way by which your gift is going to allow you to do. And your gift is designed to sustain you. But you have to trust that it does. And you'd have to be able to walk away from that secure illusion, if you will, and walk in the unknown, because that's where the power is for you, in the unknown. That's life is sweet there, man. It's not bed of roses. It'll test everything that is in you, but it's beautiful. That's all I can tell you guys. I'll tell you it's beautiful. So here you are. You were led to that room. You realize okay, this is where I need to be. How did you make that release?
Yeah, I mean, it still took a few years and a lot more investment in, because I think that there's the spiritual and then there's also the logical, and they're often, it's so nuanced for each person where they are at, what their responsibilities are. Like, do they have a family to support? It's not always like, I get this calling, you should just, because I work with so many different people. So in different areas where sometimes is people might get into a call and just quit everything with no plan, and that's usually not a good idea also. Like if you have a cushion to do that, great, but sometimes the intuitive piece is seed planting. It's like, pay attention to this, following that energy, that connection for ourselves. Is I also agree that it is like, that is where the security is, but it's nuanced. Like sometimes it's okay, how do I start planning this and start, it may not be tomorrow, but it might be over the next few years. It might be there might be a plan that needs to happen to make this transition. And I had that knowing of like, it needs to be based on this. It can't be hidden. Like this needs to be this needs to be what it's based around. But it still took a number of years in training to be just different ways, different things that already exist in psychology. So like energy psychology, transpersonal training. Like I spent a lot of money and time and many years doing additional training to be able to bring it in as a psychologist in terms of existing evidence-based models. And then it also led me into private practice, because in the existing systems, you can't do a lot of this work. Like you have to market for people who want it and you're speaking their language already.
Yeah, you have to, like I said, the journey takes you to the place where you realize that what you are giving birth can only be achieved if you branch out to give birth to it. Because if you stay where you're at, there's a way you can miscarry, if you will. And so sometimes you have to take that chance and move on. It's scary. Life is scary, guys, and but there's a reward to it. Just you will know inside of you. No one is telling you to just dump and run. I'm talking about getting inside in your meditation, in you, in your being. You have the answers there. Seek the answers, get it, and then make the decisions necessary and the steps to obtain your freedom so that you can be free. And as you began to move forward and you stepped out, how did the book came about, and the title most of all, because I love your title? How long after you stepped out did the book manifested, and how did you come up with the title of the book?
Yeah, so I've been specializing in this work for almost a decade now, or just over a decade. I've been in private practice. My awakening was it's almost 2 decades now that I've been in it. So over the last few years, I've been getting more and more of an intuitive calling of like, and also like it's intuitive. And then there's a piece of, I've worked with hundreds of different people, if not thousands at this point, who are doing their own healing work, who are in that journey of kind of deconditioning things, finding out who they really are, bringing their gifts into the world, and who have that connection with intuition. And there were just certain things I see over and over again. And there was some of the stuff I had encountered going through my awakening and trying to find people to work with. And there were just so many themes that just kept that are so common, that keep coming up for so many different clients, that I wrote the book more as a roadmap to see, because that spiritual connection piece is interesting, where it's still considered so woo. And I have the psychology piece. I had that before I went through my own awakening. I didn't believe in it before I went through my awakening. Like I thought it was maybe a placebo effect, which is powerful, but I was like, yeah, I don't know if you'll ever know. Yeah. And then it changed the whole way I relate to the world, like what I believe about reality, like how I experience reality. But I also, like, I have the psychologist part of my brain that when a lot of it was happening, I'm like, am I going crazy? Like, who do I talk to about this? I know how this sounds. Like, I know if I went to just any psychiatrist or psychologist, like this might get flagged. The DSM doesn't have a lot of places to put spiritual experiences. Like it often goes into psychosis, or there's like a few sentences at the very end and like other that are like religious spiritual experience. But Western psychology as a whole doesn't really know what to do with it. There are pockets within, like that is changing. There are more and more approaches that are open to it. I'm hopeful that it will keep evolving, but I understand even why there's some stuff I would be cautious to say to people. And so I think there's stuff of when people are going through a spiritual awakening, if you kind of Google those symptoms or intuition development, spiritual awakening, like experiencing other energy, what you'll get from Google is such a wild west of answers. Like
Yeah.
there are very helpful, credible people, whether they're regulated professionals or just very gifted healers who exist. But trying to sift through to find like who is helpful versus who is just maybe has some ability but is doing the best they can, but they're missing a whole lot of things. They don't have the depth of training and they don't know what they don't know, and that can get dangerous. Like there's well-meaning danger, and then there can also be like predatory type personalities
Oh, yeah.
in every
Absolutely.
space. So like a lot of that's kind of why
Absolutely.
I wrote it. And I kind of just short level beta tested a couple different titles. I was more drawn to the one if it fits for people, I swear, there's just stuff where there's so much benefit. There's so much benefit in the intuitive, the spiritual. Like I want to normalize it and start the conversation, like bring more conversation to the public awareness, to be like, this is real. It doesn't mean it's a mental health episode. Like it can be a huge source of resilience.
Yeah.
On the same side, sometimes it can get into a place where it's destabilizing, or it may actually be a symptom of a mental health concern.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, everybody's path is really unique. And there's a lot of things that, again, like those cultural systems have taken from spiritual experiences or from teachers, where it can get into like toxic positivity, or like don't feel any bad thoughts at all. Like don't think bad things or you're going to attract bad things to happen to you. And it's like, that's not how this works. Like we're still having a human experience. We're in this human shell.
Yeah. They're the charlatans of within the spiritual realm. Bad doctors, they're bad comps, they're bad people in every arena. But I always tell people, they haven't been able to manipulate the spirit or the soul of the man. They have known how to manipulate the five senses, if you will. But that intuition in there, they haven't been able to manipulate him. He is the one, that one, you have to listen to that one when you are on your search. And that one will tell you, this is a quack, this is a good one. You'll find yourself pulled to this one. You'll find yourself, when you stand before you, like, no,
it's so tough though too, because it's like for some people, yes, but for others it's really complicated, because again, that awakening piece will challenge us to be like, what if this is intuition, and what if this is like mirroring or showing me places to heal, or like those unconscious beliefs. So sometimes if it's like early trauma, it's really confusing to see like to trust an authority figure, to say like, is this actually our own trauma is one of the biggest blocks to really clearly receiving intuition. So our healing journey itself is so intricately tied to that connection within ourselves. And we're all at different levels, or like start out at different places in that.
Yeah. Take time. I tell people, learn to meditate. In meditation, you'll be amazed how you will get answers in meditation. Meditation is not always just sitting down, and meditation is done many different forms of meditation. Meditation is, I know a woman that told me that when she vacuumed, meditated, running, walking. I mean, there's so many different ways. Whatever it is to make you disconnect from. Meditation is slowing your thoughts down. Whatever you're doing to cause you to be able to slow your thoughts down, that's what you do, and it will guide you and bring you through. All of you guys that are listening, you know how we do it here at Threads of Enlightenment. We send you to our guests because they came here. I believe the reason why she's here, I believe why Katie's here, is because there's a demand for her knowledge, her wisdom, and her insights and her gifts. That's why she's here. And so we're honored, and we're going to provide all of her links so that you guys can get to her, because she has some good stuff for you so that you can partake of. She has her practice. She has the wisdom that she's gained from all of her knowledge of studying the practical stuff, but also her awareness and her awakening in the spiritual stuff. And she knows both worlds, and she has a holistic approach to you to help you discover you. And that's all this is to help you discover you so that you can become the better human spirits while you're here on this planet. So it's 2025. What is it that you feel? Because I know, as I mentioned to you, there's something in the air that we sense as an empath. What is it you sense that is there that you feel that one must be aware of, or a change that you find yourself needing to make within your practice, within your servanthood? What is it that you feel that is happening in your world that you're adding or taking away from your approach in this new year?
Yeah, so it's a continuation of the themes I've been feeling the last few years. Like, I think the book was a start of it. I am feeling drawn more to, and I don't know what this looks like yet. I'm not coming out with this like, oh, I have this plan and this is like, I'm going to execute it. It's kind of a co-creation space where I'm like, I don't really know what this looks like, because when I felt called to build my psychology practice, I had a clear roadmap for like how to do that. This just feels like serve more people in a way that's more accessible. Like, so it's not going to be therapy, but it's like, is it workshops? Is it groups? It's like, how do I help get this knowledge out there in a way that I still have my psychology practice like separate, but can help more people in more accessible ways?
Yeah. There's always the internet.
Yeah.
And there's ways there's people all over the world needs help so badly. And this particular venue has afforded us the opportunity to be able to reach way beyond our living room and our country. And so, yeah, it's a pull. I'm in Thailand, and here we are. So it's a wonderful venue. I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. I enjoyed this. It is my first interview this year, and so I am excited to have you and to welcome you to our platform and for our family. I cannot wait for them to hear your wisdom so that they can make some changes. Again, we're going to provide everything for you guys to get access to her so you can change your path this year and your families, change your trajectory so that you can become a better human spirit while you're here on this planet. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. Didn't harass you that bad.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.